This is a tasty burger. What's up, ladies and germs? Thanks for coming back to The Daily Show. This week we have the wonderful Kobi Omenaka. I've known Kobi for an awful long time. Back when GLPro was based out of a shed. In fact, even before that, when we just had a podcast and a business wasn't even an idea for me and Tony, we started talking to Kobi and we were on his show, Flixwatcher. That was 4 years ago. Flixwatcher is now 202 episodes down. I was on episode 4 and Tony was on episode 12. Crazy. So podcasting was a different landscape back then. So was content creation. So was social media. We feel like old dogs after 4 years of doing this now. Check out Kobi. He's such a good show, right? It's so much fun listening to brilliant guests talk about movies that you can watch on Netflix yourself and have your own opinion. It's the same conversation we've all had with our friends down the pub, but with some people that you really want to listen to. So check out Flixwatcher. But in the meantime, jump on this show. Check out Kobi. He's so cool. He's such a relaxed guy. It's a lovely show. And listen to me catch up with my old friend. And we are live. Welcome back to another episode of The Daily Show. This week, I'm joined with one of the first people we ever started speaking to about when we dipped our toes into podcasting. Not only is a bit 202 episodes in, when I was on episode 4 and Tony was on episode 12, way back in its genesis. So for this week, I'd like to welcome the wonderful, the awesome, the one and only Mr. Kobi Omenaka. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Thank you for that lovely intro there, Jay.
Why, thank you. As you know, I clearly just did that completely off the top of my head as well.
That's fine. That's just how we do it. This is how we do.
You see how prepared I am. So, Kobi, for those out there, tell us a little bit about yourself who haven't heard of you.
Yeah, so I am a podcaster and marketer. I'm not sure which order comes first. Well, marketer first, really. And but my background was actually I was a chemical engineer. I used to work in the oil and gas industry for 10 years after graduating university in the UK and Norway and a few other countries. And then kind of the market tanked, and I pivoted to marketing because I'd done a separate degree in social media whilst working full-time in oil and gas because I'm a masochist, obviously. And then when the kind of bottom fell out of the oil and gas market, I started doing marketing more. And because I love podcasts, I thought, okay, well, I need to find some clients, I need to find out how to connect with people. And I started a podcast called the Kobi Digital Podcast. And that's when I found you guys. And you were like, yeah, I didn't know how to edit. And I found you guys and you're like, yeah, we can help you with that. And I was like, great. And that really has been like the catalyst for, what I do now, 5+ years later. So it's all down to you.
I didn't want to make sure that you said that, but the check's in the post. And now today, what you're doing today, because Kobi was the genesis of podcasting, but at the same point there was a little crossover period when you started Flixwatcher.
Yeah, so Flixwatcher came a bit after that. Kobi was it's a straightforward interview podcast. And then Flixwatcher is a podcast where myself and my friend Helen, we met on a film quiz team. And I was like, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And she was like, yes. And we came across the idea of, because there's lots of film podcasts, but they all seem to be about the new films that are out right now. And we just knew that we couldn't really commit to going to the cinema every week in, week out, or 5 films to be on top of things.
No, it will definitely not be possible. And any shows I look at that, I'm like, well, yeah. There's no way you're not stealing the content and being able to watch it this much. No one's going to the cinemas that much unless they're, journalists working for Empire or something.
Exactly.
It's very feasible.
So if this is your kind of hobby, which it really is, and we didn't have any money, so we couldn't rely on. We had to be earning money elsewise. So it was Helen's idea mainly to say, what about something on Netflix where main benefit of Netflix is that everyone has Netflix, even more so in the pandemic. And we talk about films that are on Netflix in the UK specifically. Obviously, people do listen for different markets, but we focus on Netflix UK. And what we had was guests on, and we had yourself and Tony on this very early on in the run, which is kind of insane.
so
thanks for joining us. Yeah, it was, yeah. And the film, I think you chose the one. I think that was Tony's choice, wasn't it?
No. Tony chose Jet Li's The One,
Yeah,
and I chose A Talented Mr. Ripley. But the interesting thing about Flixwatcher when it started was that Netflix was a very, very different animal. Like back when Flixwatcher, and when did Flixwatcher start?
We do 50 episodes a year, so just over 4 years ago, I'd say we started.
So it's 2016, 2017. Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. The time flies. But back then, Netflix was like the place where you'd be able to find Police Academy 3 and, Speed 2, the one you don't want to watch. Like I remember me.
It was always weird that. Because they had at one point, they had For the Dark World. It's like, cool, I'll watch that. But can I watch the first one first and then go into that one? I don't know. You can watch Thor the Dark World. It's like, I don't want to do that.
And then it'd be a case of when they finally do get the first Thor, you'd be like, sweet, I'm going to watch both. It's happening. And the rights are gone. But it was kind of the beginning of the streaming wars, right? There wasn't Now TV. There definitely wasn't Disney and the bigger sort of players now. But I remember me and Tony, when we were going to be on the show, because we did 2 separate episodes, but we were both on, but we're going through it and being like, no, don't even want to watch that. Don't want to talk about that. Like, it wasn't as easy. But amazing thing is, 4 years later, like Netflix is, it's the heavyweight champ now, to a degree, depending on who
they've won Oscars. The TV shows are outstanding. And the problem with Netflix now is it's too much. I tried to complete Netflix when the pandemic happened, still couldn't do it, even with all the extra time. So, and then I bought Disney Plus, and obviously I've got Now TV as well. I'm just a masochist, I guess.
I used to moan about the TV license, and then I realized I have 67 different streaming channels that I pay for on a monthly basis.
And then every like couple of months ago, well, should we get rid of one? I'm like, but then we miss out on no.
What about Speed 2 though? I might watch Speed 2 because you just never know.
So what happened? This is the thing. When Cobra Kai came to Netflix, which is one of my favorite TV shows ever, and I'm so glad it exists. And my wife and I, we wanted to go through and watch the Karate Kids. We were like, okay, we're inspired to watch Karate Kids. Karate Kid 1 was on Netflix. Karate Kid 2 was on Amazon Prime, and then so the rest of them actually. But then 2 weeks later, they've been removed off the premium Amazon Prime, and then we had to pay for Karate Kid. We were like, no, let's not pay for that.
So my top tip for an app at the moment, I don't know if you've seen it, but is Just Watch. So Just Watch is
this is what we recommend. It's the easiest way to navigate. I've saved so much money using the app and time. Justwatch.co.uk, guys. Type the film you want to watch, and it'll tell you where it's available for free if it's free, or the cheapest place you can get it if it's for rent. And
which is so good. And you can put in the channels you have, so it'll tell you what you've got free. It's so good. It saved me, I reckon, 10 grand during the pandemic in £3.50 movies that I was like, I really want to watch it, and I would have just bought it on Prime, but instead it turns out it was on Now TV or it's somewhere else. So let's go back, because chemical engineer, sure, that makes sense, but why did right? But if you've got that mind, if I guess it did, you did it. I didn't do it. It wouldn't have made sense for me.
Sure.
But why? What sort of year is that? Why did you do the social media course as well? Why was there even a thought of that?
I started blogging, I guess 2006, and through that I made first websites and started making websites for other people. And I met someone. When Meetup was a thing, or meet people and talk about things. So I went to a blog and Meetup when I was living in Manchester, and she told me that she did this course at Salford University, which is social media course, a social media master's course. And the good thing about it is that you only had 2 days contact time, and the rest of it, so you could work full time and still do this other course. And I was just like, this is when social media, no one really knew what it was.
What sort of year is this?
Like, this is 2008. I joined the course. Yeah. So I think things like Friendster had been sold for like £250 million a year before, which is peanuts by today's kind of valuations for companies. But I just thought it sounded like a cool thing to do. Go back to university. I'll still be working full time and learn about social media. And I just thought it'd be quite interesting. So I did it. By this time, I'd actually started working in Norway, so I had to fly back to Manchester to this course for 2 days a month,
For 2 days.
and then fly back. But I'm from Manchester, so I had the flat there, and I used the opportunity to visit friends and family at the same time. So it just all kind of tied in together.
Yeah.
But I never really expected it to come anything.
and now you introduce yourself as a marketer. How cool is that? But a perfect time to do it. Like, I know people who have come out of university from, say, doing design at the wrong time. And, they were 2 years before it was like, by the way, this is, don't worry about print anymore. This is digital.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any useful, but to go back and kind of like, not retrain necessarily, but this is interesting. Let's go and learn that in 2008, because like, that's kind of when the internet became a thing. 2005, 2010, when it became this useful beast, and in at least a shade of what we see today.
Yeah, I think I still don't know really where my head was at when I signed up for the course, because I was on we were on Facebook. Facebook didn't even start. They didn't have any adverts on Facebook at the time, so it was all kind of really speculative. So for me, it's just like a fun course to be.
Yeah. Just a funsy thing. This is fun. This Facebook thing's cool.
Yeah. But I tell you what, the thing I learned most about the course is that I really enjoy learning. And that's something I've kept with me through the other things, learning how to podcast with your guys, it helps. But one thing I didn't like was writing reports about the stuff I learned. So hopefully I've taken that learning ethos forward and still learn, every day. But then just apply it to stuff I want to do. Without having someone, and you don't necessarily need a degree to do what I do, but it was good to be able to have that kind of that framework around it.
Especially then, right? Because as we're talking about, like, a podcast that has been running for 200 episodes is a really, really old podcast now. Like, how many podcasts make it past episode 50?
It's supposed to be like 8. Well, not many. It's a massive. It's supposed to fail by episode 12 or something like that.
That's right. Pod fading. It literally is a whole new term of pod fading, because so many shows start and disappear after in double digits. Like, forget getting to 100. Forget getting to the double centurion. But content as a whole wasn't like a conversation then. No. So something like a podcast was as a fun outlet type thing. It was like a YouTube video series. It wasn't seen, I didn't quite realize podcasting was going to branch off and become its own genre, its own staple in the world.
Content marketing. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. And then the fact it would be so, useful with regards to the content marketing as well, but it just became its own beast. Never thought it happened. I just, I thought it'd kind of be amalgamated into radio, or it'd be eaten up by YouTube or something. Yeah,
for me, it was just it's like a creative outlet. Which, because like I said, I've been blogging for a while, and not that I don't like blogging anymore, but you have to get into a weird kind of headspace to think, right, I'm going to sit down and write this thing for like a few hours and then post it. Whereas for me, it's more natural to be speaking to other people about films and have that camaraderie and then post it out there. So it became the more natural way for me to get stuff out there.
Well, and that's why podcasting is so helpful for content, for content marketing. Take it all the way back into business, and why it's so helpful is because it's very easy. It's a meeting, right? Yeah. All we've essentially doing here for this live show is we've set out a Zoom call. It's not a Zoom call, but you know what I mean? But it's just a video conference call that we happen to be broadcasting. There's no difference to that. But it's also a reciprocal thing. I can run out of stuff to say and to pick it up and carry on that conversation. Whereas if I'm sitting to write a blog, it's just me trying to get something out there. And it's like a comedian who's not gone on stage and actually worked out the jokes. I'm just writing it and being like, love it. But at least with the podcast, you can feel the ebbs and flows of the conversation. You can go through it. But the learning piece, I think, is so interesting. I don't know any podcaster, even it doesn't matter about what the subject is or like what the subject matter is. Every podcast host I know loves to learn. Like conversations, you learn so much, even if it's just I learn about the person I'm talking to, not not some life skill or mind bending new ability, but it opens that side of the mind just to like have a space open to learn, to remember information, to kind of absorb stuff. And I love how that kind of like feeds back into life. Like I find a bit, you speak to other people and who are podcasters, it's an easy conversation. and they're up for learning. They're up for being part of that conversation as well.
I mean, that's why when I got my first iPhone, which is when I super dived into podcasting, listened to podcasts, and that's when I was like, I noticed like a distinct shift from a lot of the type of TV I was watching, for example. So all the kind of chat shows, I don't watch them anymore, and I find them super tedious. Because now with podcasts, you can have an hour with Tom Hanks talking about his whole life, rather than the 4 minutes that he's got to promote his thing and the stupid anecdote
and a quick anecdote of like, oh, didn't you have some burritos recently, Kobi?
Yeah, it's like tell us about that caravan. That caravan you bought in Skegness.
Yeah.
You
you won't find it funny at all. No, exactly. That's very, very true. And I love chat shows. I love, which is kind of why I adore podcasting, because I love conversations. And you're right, because podcasting has destroyed. I watch Jimmy Fallon, or I watch The Tonight Show, or I'm sure if you're even watching like Parkinson and stuff from back in the day now, would be like, why are you bringing someone else out? What Billy Connolly's done? He spoke for like 4 minutes. I love the long form chat, and especially that you get to see behind the curtain. No one can really keep up a facade for over an hour.
No, that's what you listen to people. Mark Maron, for example, he's the legend of this. He's probably the best of this. Other podcasts are fallen by the wayside because the hosts now, to me, are a bit dubious. So I've stopped listening to them. But Mark Maron is one of the people. He clearly says sometimes I know the name and I know a few films I've been in. And each episode, he dives in and he pulls some nuggets out there. And like you say, people have a front for the last 5-10 minutes. But after that 10 minutes, you're going deep down, and and you'd be amazed where that goes if you're up for the journey.
Yeah, and you've got to be very, very practiced to be able to have a conversation that people are able to see, not just a conversation between you and I in a back room somewhere where, did he say that? I don't know. But like a recorded piece of content going out there. You've got to be very practiced to keep that up for 20 minutes, half an hour of Russell Brand is my favorite example of it.
Sure.
Him on the Joe Rogan show. He's on. I'm quite a fan. I love words. I love language as a whole, and he's quite, a real master of it. For the first half hour of a show when he was sat with Joe Rogan, and which was a 3.5 hour show, he's on, and it's like he's so on. It's hard to understand him. I'm pulling out my thesaurus trying to work out what you just said 2 minutes ago, right? But after about half an hour, 40 minutes, he's slipped into it's him. It's the same conversation that his friend Jane has with him when she sits down with him, and that's
when they're on the bus.
Yeah, when they're on the bus, exactly, and they're sitting drinking a can of Coke or something. And I love that about podcasting. I think it was. I didn't realize there was such a big hole for this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's more and more of it. And I think Louis Theroux brought out his podcast, and he's big for big documentaries. His documentary is amazing, but then also he can show how he applies it in this format in his podcast, which is an hour 10 minutes per episode, and he pulls out the same kind of insane picks from people in that hour time versus the months it would have taken to do the same kind of documentary about the same subject, about the same person.
Exactly. So, yeah. And the multitude of people as well. The thing I'm loving, and the pandemic was great for that, because a lot of people who would never have had the time to do podcasts have started it. I'm a huge Fake Doctors, Real Friends podcast. The Scrub Show. Just loved it.
It's absolutely magnificent.
I think it's potentially one of the finest examples of a podcast and a podcast evolution. You could see it at episode 1, episode 10, episode 20. They've got new segments. They've got new bits. They've jumped into that.
The producers speak more, and they have their own personalities. And now there's a spin-off podcast. There's the Star Wars one coming out with those guys.
It's amazing. They've just done
a live show.
So cool.
Yeah. So it's great. And sorry for the guys who are listening, that Fake Doctors Real Friends is Zach Braff and Donald Faison. And I loved Scrubs back in the day. And I'm a big fan of Recap podcast as well, because I'm a big film and TV nerd. And it's great when you get people who are involved in the show talking about the show you're a big fan of. But this doesn't even tell you really about what Fake Doctors Real Friends is about, because it's a whole different kind of beast. Nowadays they talk less and less specifically about the episodes. And you'll get through the episode and they'll tell you a story about it, but then the conversations they have, talk about Black Lives Matter, talking about Trump and stuff, and you know, the guests they have on there is really, really, it's just a fun show. And there's, I think the title "Fake Doctors, Real Friends" really does say just those two friends that are the backbone of, and happen to be talking about scrubs now, and that's what it is.
And what's amazing about it is there's podcasts like that elsewhere, and there's podcasts, you know, with the stars of the show, but it's usually periphery people from the show. I'm also a big fan of Talking Sopranos because I love The Sopranos. But that's, admittedly, Tony Soprano, James Gandolfini isn't alive, so he can't be on the show. But you know, it's two of the other characters.
It's Michael Imperioli, isn't it? And the guy who played Bobby Bacala.
Absolutely.
the guy who played Bobby Bacala. That's the problem with it.
Steve Sciarreppa.
Yeah, there you
go. No, exactly. And what's very interesting about that dynamic is that it's an actor and an actor-director. And because of that, they have very different kind of views on it. But that is much more an actor and director's watch through of a show they're in, whereas Fake Doctors, Real Friends is a true podcast because, as you say, they're no longer having to stick to the safety of the script for that show or the 30-minute what was released. For me, the thing I love about it is it's a view into TV because it's the two stars of the show. They have star power. Their guests are all of the people in the show. It's not the third AD that they managed to get because they know him and he's free. It's the showrunner is now a big part of the show. And
Bill Lawrence.
Exactly. Who is phenomenal and a real hero of mine as well. And being able to hear like the dynamics behind things is such a wonderful thing. But it's so interesting how that has only come out from free time. There's free time. Like they weren't making movies. So they had the ability to be like, do you want to jump on some remote calls while we're all locked down? It is now one of the most successful shows.
And it's good that it seems that they're getting work out of it as well, because now their notoriety or people listen to more as actors and as, I guess, freelancers. And this is part of why I started the Kobi Digital podcast as well, is that it puts you like top of mind of people. And now when and Donald Faison's on Powerpuffs, which is a gig he didn't have when he started. And I think that they keep bleeping out some of the stuff they've been offered because they're just so excited that they offer these really cool gigs. Yeah. And that's what I say to some people. It's like, when going back to Kobi Digital, a few of the people I interviewed for the show then came back like 2 months later, like, "Kobi, we've got this project on. Do you want to work with us on it?" I was like, "Yeah, fine." I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting more down the learning side of like, I don't know how to do this properly yet. I'll speak to you, and then I can also share people. But then, like 2 months later, I was getting work from them, and that is something that's I've seen happening again. And I produced Twiggy's podcast, and 3 or 4 times she's been offered like, "Oh, by the way, Twiggy, I've got you in mind for a role, or can you do this campaign with us?" And it was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So if you're resonating with people, and then you, because you don't have that facade, and people just grow to like you, I think it really does help. Yeah, and with Hollywood,
but it gives you the chance. It's as you're saying, it's your top of people's minds. It's the point of content marketing is not necessarily to sell anything. It's to just remind people that you exist. And like Quentin Tarantino used to be phenomenal at going back through his incredible Rolodex of actors to say, "Hey, John Travolta, he's really good," and no one's kind of heard of him for a while, and be able to go and find those. Well, nowadays John Travolta would be able to have the Staying Alive podcast and you know, be in the front of a forefront of people's minds. Not necessarily the next director, but what about the director's assistant or their assistant's assistant, you know, and get out
casting director or the casting director's assistant. Or
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a super, and because if it's part of your personality and it's an easy way for you to get the content out there, then it's a no-brainer. To be honest with you.
And I have to admit, like, you know, for us, we actually found it when I started the Daily Show. It was just you know, grab your phone, do a video, kind of horrendously. Just from doing that 2 or 3 times a week and posting those out, pretty much every one of the clients that we had and had been working for some time came back to us and were like, "Can we still afford to work with you?" But yes. Yeah, and I was like, yeah. Please don't leave. Like, I'm just doing hippie videos now, man. But you know, it was generally a conversation. It was like, I know you're doing so well now, because even with people who we were speaking to on a weekly, daily basis, we suddenly got through to more. We were more in their mindset. We were higher on their list of stuff, and it's like, oh God, hope we can jump on this train. I'm like, you're on this train.
Yeah. Just sit down and join and
exactly. So you've had some great guests, as we said, episode 4 and episode 12, real highlight. But no, when we first started the show, you were out there speaking to smaller podcasts. Podcasting wasn't a big thing. Since then, there has been some pretty phenomenal guests from some pretty massive places within the film and podcasting industry. How did that happen? Like, how did that get out there? How are you making connections like this and stumbling into these awesome conversations?
Well, this is the other thing about podcasting, right? Is that people are happy to be guests on podcasts. It's fairly, especially like I say nowadays, lockdown means that people are on Zoom, so it's essentially the same kind of thing. This is a glorified version of Zoom. So if they're not speaking to their son or their sister who's halfway around the world, they might as well be on a podcast with someone for half an hour. And but even before lockdown happened, all we just did was send this guy, send this girl, send this person an email. And if they said no, they said no. If they said yes, they said yes. And they joined us on the show. And quite early on, I think Adam Buxton was one that unlocked. It was like a real surprise. Not really a surprise because he always comes across as a nice guy, and I had met him, not in a way, but I sent him an email, there was no answer. I sent him an email a couple of days ago just saying, I don't know if you got my email, and he responded to that in like half an hour saying, oh yeah, I like the sound of your show. If I can make it work time-wise, then I'll do it. And this is when we had to do it in person. And then like a month later, his PA said, Adam's going to be in London between this time and this time with some time available. Could you do it then? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So it is a testament to contact people. Don't be a dick. Sorry, I'm not sure what I said.
No. Don't be a dick. It's a big part of the show. Don't be a dick. Absolutely.
I respect people's wishes, and you may get people onto your show. And one thing I always say is that we've had friends, really good friends of ours, who are on the film quiz team who took like 2 or 3 years to come on our podcast, versus people who are quote unquote famous who took like 2 months. So the draw of coming on a podcast might well be within the reach of the people you want to attract onto your show. And again, that's what I did with Kobi Digital. I thought inviting people onto a podcast is a much more attractive proposition than, hey guys, hey, can you write 1,000 words blog post for me so I can post them on my website?
Yeah, no. and I need it within the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not going to do that. I can sit down and have a chat for half an hour, but yeah, I'm not going to sit down and write a post for you. Yeah.
And I've literally spoken to people more so in the US, because podcasting has kind of been a little bit more of an understanding part of the vernacular for a little bit longer. But people use the podcasting solely for new business, just for business, for lead generation, because it's very hard to say like, hi, Kobi, do you want to sit down and let me pitch sales stuff to you? No, thank you, Jay, I'm fine. But it's much easier to be like, hey, do you want to be on my show? And after an hour of us talking and me interviewing you about you, and like, we have a really good time, as everyone does when they're being asked questions about a subject they know about. At the end of that, there's always the 5 minutes afterwards, 10 minutes afterwards to be like, so you mentioned this. What are you get into it?
In the green room, back in the green room.
Exactly.
Green room pitch.
Which sounds sleazy as hell to me. I don't like that. But it's, it's literally, it goes back to what you say. People will literally accept a podcast. Like they're happy to be invited on a show. It's helpful for them. It's a reciprocal relationship. It's worth them being on the show as much as it is for you as well. And as you said, for famous people, don't worry. Like, I say famous people, but people who you feel are too big for your show, contact them. You'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. Because I know from when your show first started, if you want to get in touch with someone who's quote unquote famous, it wasn't necessarily influencers. You couldn't message their Instagram. You had to get in touch with them somehow. Send them one of those emails.
Yeah. We just find people's agents and send them a message. And if they responded, they responded. And that still really is the case nowadays. So yeah, I don't know if that's a tip for anyone. Not if you want to get people who you think are big in business, big in entertainment, big in sport, then you can genuinely ask them. I think it's Tim Ferriss actually, who said about reaching out and contacting people, and in the sense, don't be a dick for those emails, and you'd be surprised who responds to you. Even if they respond to say no, you're like, oh, you
thanks.
You read my email.
Win.
Yeah.
and I always count that. Same thing I always teach salespeople is that it's a weird thing to get your head around, especially if you try and do sales. Weird thing to try and do if you're trying to book people in a show. Any kind of like outbound where you're like, hey, person, maybe, is horrible to get any kind of like rejection. I count that as a win. Like, send out messages. You're not asking for, as long as you're not asking for anything that's as you say, don't be a dick. Don't ask for something out of the realms that isn't going to be fair. Like, hi, Gary V, can I have you for 8 hours to do this free conference? Nah, that's not cool. But can I get you for half hour to be on my show? Maybe.
Yeah.
And
I know people who got Gary V on their shows just doing the exact same thing.
I went and filmed in VaynerMedia with one of the podcasters that we work with, who did exactly that.
Yeah,
we sat down with him at something at once and was like, "Hey, do you want? Can I be on the show?" And he was like, sure. And 6 months later, we were in New York, and he was on the show. Like, it's just having the kind of bolshiness to ask, but not so bolshy that you're a double glazing salesperson.
I think, and that's the thing. The double glazing salesperson is, they go around to people's houses and they try to sell you something you don't want. And not that, I mean, there are analogies from inviting guests onto your show versus sales. The easiest sales are when you align magically with the people who want the thing that you're selling. And that's when and so no one ever says, if you're running out of petrol, I'm stuck on M25 and someone says, do you want some petrol? I'm going to bite the guy's hand off. But if I've just literally filled up my tank and someone rings it up and says, do you want some petrol? I'm like, no.
Hell no. Of course not.
No, so why you ringing?
And how dare you insinuate I could run out of petrol?
Yeah, exactly.
It's so true, though.
And this is the piece with the content marketing is that if I'm listening to the podcast and all the time there's these guys saying, hey, by the way, we sell petrol whenever you want it. Then if I did get to like 5 miles of like petrol left, I'd be like, oh, I know these guys. I can know these guys. I know these guys can help me out because
you want to be the guy. You want to be the business when someone goes, "Who was the?" You want to be the first answer that comes out of there, and the only way is to kind of put yourself out there. But going back to what you said earlier, the thing I love about this kind of content creation, people don't like watch. So people don't see. I release enough content that they know who I am. They know I'm handsy and I swear a lot and I talk too much. Right? They don't get in touch if they don't want to work with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, your personality matches like straight away.
Yeah, exactly. And if people do get in touch, then they do want to work with that. Yeah. Which, if I go back 15 years in sales, my lord, someone wants to have a conversation. Yay! That was the magic space. So, as more and more good shows came on, and one of the questions I want to ask as well, what was the first Netflix show movie film that you did on Flixwatcher? I
think it was Beasts of No Nation. Idris Elba, directed and shot by Carrie Fukunaga, who did True Detective season 1.
I know, one of my favorite shows. I haven't seen that movie. Okay,
it's astonishing and dark. It's one of the things where it's got a low rewatch score, which is one of our parameters for rating films. Is how often you like to rewatch it. It's a hard film, but it's Idris Elba already, and it's great. Absolutely
That's fantastic. So good. And going back to the rewatchability, so good. Because if I think back now, just to mine and Tony's, I still watch the one now and again, but I haven't watched Talented Mr. Ripley in many years. So plans for the show, every show kind of spins out. I know you've done 202 episodes, but you've also done bonus episodes and just a bunch of good stuff. The world's going to open up again. Was there any plans that you had which should have happened in 2020 that you get to implement moving forward now?
To be honest, this is where the kind of pivot's been beneficial to a lot of people, is we always had to do the shows in person, which meant either them traveling to us or we travel to them, which is always fine. But also that took 2 hours, potentially 3 hours of a recording, which would take 90 minutes. And also it meant that there was no way we're going to speak to people even in like Southampton, coming from London. It just wouldn't happen unless they happen to be, a few people said, but actually, I'm going to be in London in 2 months' time. Can we do it then? And we're like, yeah, if you're happy to travel from Leeds, we'll make sure we're available on a Saturday. So now it's the sound isn't as good as it is in person, and the vibe isn't as good as in person, but it means that we can contact people. And one session, we had one recording where one guy was in just north of Auckland in New Zealand, and someone else was in Oklahoma, and we're recording the same podcast at the same time. So it just means we've got more people to reach out to, really. I don't know how much we'll pivot, and we're never. One thing people do say is that we get good guests on there, known guests, but that's never really been the pull of our show. And you'd be surprised that the thing that gets more people to the show is the film that they know more than the guest, more than specific guest. But if there's a well-known guest and it's a film that they know, then that's when we get.
Sure, yeah, that's the magic sweet spot.
Yeah, the Venn diagram.
Is it the Adam Buxton show when he talks about Pacific Rim? Great, but when he talks about the weird French Nouveau film that was made on Netflix, no.
Are you sure you want to talk about that one? Yeah. Okay, fine.
Now, how do you do it with? Because back in the day, we were picking shows. As you say, it's very hard to. I say the guests were picking shows. I want to watch them chat about this show. 200 episodes in. Have you ever? I guess you don't do duplicates.
Yeah.
So what do you do? If people say, I want to talk about this, and you're like, nah, sorry about that. Jay did that in 2016.
Yeah, so we have a list. We have a list on our site that is going to be shared with people to
nice.
People are going to join and say, here's a list of films you can't do. Then
I really wanted to do the one.
I know, like, but yeah, 4 years ago. So there's no repeats, but we've done 200 shows, 200 films, and it sounds like a lot, but how many films there are that I haven't watched and recorded is insane. So I don't think we'll ever run out of options.
I tell you what's amazing, though, out of all of that and have everything gone through, same theme tune.
Yeah.
Same co-hosts.
Yeah. 4
years in. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, thanks. And it's purely a fun thing as well. And, I've done other podcasts as well as alongside that.
Yeah.
And that's been great. And, it just shows that I think I know people who have a few podcasts and they tend to have one that's their foundation one and one that they go away and do things and come back to it and they do things. And that's the Flixwatcher is the kind of foundation one. Whereas the other podcasts do like the Wire strips where, talk about recap shows, talk about the Wire. And that's when we, myself and Dave, who's from the Cinema podcast, which is also a good, fun film podcast. So that's the Cinema is his foundation one. And then he comes and joins me to do the Wire script.
Amazing.
For 12 episodes a year. And then we go back and do everything. So
I remember Kevin Smith and one of the guys from the Nerdist started tossed salad and scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs, yeah. I've never actually heard that. I just remember the title and thinking, but that's about Frasier, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about Frasier. But the problem is it's Kevin Smith who really likes an idea and then stops liking it and disappears. So I think there was like 6 episodes, 7, 10 episodes, whatever, where they were doing total pod fading, basically. Yeah. But 10 episodes, they were doing 2 shows a go. And then there was a break for a year and a half or something. They did 2 shows. So they never quite got through the one of the longest running podcasts that's ever been. Whereas
longest running film, TV shows.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
But jumping back into Fake Doctors, Real Friends, they very early on have been like, we're going to run out of shows. If we're burning through these bad boys twice a week.
Yeah. And,
so, Kobi, we try and keep this a little bit short so people can have some fun on LinkedIn while they're working or smash out a quick podcast on their way home. But this has been awesome, man. It's been so good to catch up. It's been an absolute pleasure. Reminds me of sitting in the shed with you and Helen and Tony and recording those Flixwatcher shows all way back when.
Well, before, on that note, myself and Helen, look, we've not had any repeat films. We've had a few returning guests. So we'd love yourself and Tony to join us again for a film each.
Totally.
Get on that. I'll send you the link to the page of films you can't choose, and also just watch and have a think. And
amazing, because that's a lot easier. Has anyone done Bright yet? Because I'm quite a Bright fan.
Oof, that'd be interesting. This is the thing that slightly pivoted is that we've kind of said to people, try not crappy films. I haven't watched Bright because the reports were not good.
Oh, it's a winner.
We'll potentially see. But yeah, no one's done Bright. But this is where...
Well, I can say for Tony for a fact that he'd love to be on, because it was easily one of our favorite. Like we here and I've been on a lot of podcasts, and that is one of the most fun ones. Especially, we and Tony did a bit of a went back and reacts and listened to it. And Helen hated the one. She hated it with an unbridled passion, and it may have been the best part of the show, is being Tony trying to defend a movie that does not deserve it.
No.
So, Kobi,
Jason Statham's accent was the thing we made.
That's when he was.
Jason Statham's accent was the worst. Yeah,
still trying the half American. I think he still has hair in that one though, so it's really going back. Kobi, if people want to find you, where's the best place to find the show and find your good self?
So Flixwatcher, FLIX, as in Netflix Watcher. Type that into Google, we'll pop up. And also myself personally, Kobestar, KOBESTARR is my non-dubsum anywhere on social media, is me. So you can find me there. So say hello, and if you do say hello from here, tell me that you joined from the Daily Show. It would be great to hear from you.
That's right. Just say Jay sent you. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. Kobi, thank you for joining us. This was absolutely awesome. No, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Daily Show. Take it easy.
Take care. Bye.